Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Filled with stories of inspiration, Loving Our Life's Work podcast shares examples of courage, perseverance, and triumph. Our guests are examples of people who are actively living their life's purpose, and they've come to share the vision of their life's work with us so that we can learn to give ourselves permission to live ours. Now, if you feel like you've gained some inspiration from this podcast today, or we've added value to your world, please subscribe and follow us for more content. Comment, hit thumbs up on the podcast, and share it, of course, with someone you know who would benefit from hearing this amazing story. I'm Adam Devaney, clinical social worker and founder and CEO of the Life's Work Positivity brand. Today we have with us Bob Wischer. Bob is the relationship engineer. As the founder of Alive 365 Wellness, Men Becoming Better Men, and Heart Forged Coaching, Bob serves as a personal coach to driven men, health coach to those needing accountability, and mentor to men who are just waking up, and trainer to leaders in the men's support space. His mission is to empower men to transform their lives from isolation and fear to purpose and connection, while fostering a life rich in joy, service, and authenticity, aligned, of course, with their deepest values. I'd like to start by thanking Bob for taking the time to come and share with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure, Bob. So why don't you share with the audience a little bit about your coaching platform, and if you want to transition after that into some ways that came about in your life.
Okay, sure. So relationship engineer comes from what I've been doing for almost 30 years now, which is working in the corporate automotive industry here in the Metro Detroit area. I basically, for that whole period of time, I've worked as a program manager, which that means I'm watching over the scope of the program, the project that we're working on, and managing relationships between engineering, manufacturing, sales, testing, suppliers, vendors, all kinds of different entities that go into making car parts, which we then sell to, the big three or the big, all the big automotive companies. And it's been a very robust learning experience, managing different personalities, different situations, staying cool under pressure, things like that, dealing with customers, all kinds of stuff. So it's really taught me that no problem is too big to solve, and especially when it comes to our relationships. How I got into the work was back in 2017. I hit my personal rock bottom. I had gotten divorced a couple of years prior to that. Was struggling with the aftermath and the things that came of that, through the process there. And then I was in a job where it was great because I had received the promotion that I always wanted, but it ended up being more than I probably should have been able to handle at that point in my life with everything else going on. And it wasn't going well. And then the company ended up being bought by the company that I had left to go there, which was another irony in itself. But during that period of time, I realized that I just can't do it. I just can't do this on my own. I need somebody with some wisdom, or at least some ability to guide me towards because I knew, even at that point, almost 10 plus years ago now, I knew that I was not doing what I was meant to be doing. And that's really something that had been progressively getting more bothersome for me year after year after year. I've had a great career in the automotive industry, but I was always out of alignment. I never felt like I was doing what that I was supposed to be doing. And it wasn't until I hired a coach myself and got into, what it is, because at that point I always thought coaching was like Tony up on stage, just, pumping people up and doing his thing. And I really never knew that it was this intimate, you know, help. I love you so much that I want to help you kind of situation that you get into. And until I started experiencing it, I had no idea what it was. And then once I found out, I was hooked. I was like, yeah, this is exactly, I not only do I need it for myself, but I want to do it for other people. So that's how I got started. And that was back, like I said, 2017, and been doing it for almost 7 years now. And it's grown, it's changed. I started out in the health coaching realm. I've moved into life coaching, and then kind of narrowed that down in the last couple of years to specifically working with men. 5 years ago, I read a book called The Truth About Men by Devon Franklin, and in addition to some other books I had read, in the very close proximity to that one, but that one really, it hit me one day that I need a group of men around me. I want a group of men around me, and I want them not only just for me, but for each other. And so I had known about the Meetup app, and I put it out there that we were going to meet every other week, and just see what happened. And I was going to do a study. It was basically a book study. I was going to do that. I was going to walk men through the course of that book, and it ended up being so much more. Some men came into the group that had been in men's groups out on the East Coast, where I guess they've been doing this for years. It was a revelation to me, because when I looked at men's groups around this area, I had found one. There was a guy doing the same thing as me with a book study with a different book called No More Mr. Nice Guy. So I participated in that one until it kind of fizzled out. And then there was another group of men that met at a church somewhere, but they had been meeting for like 10 years at that point. And I was a new guy coming in, and they didn't know me from Adam. So they didn't make me feel comfortable and welcomed. Like they really wanted a new person to add perspective. So I said, I'm just going to create a group. So I did. And that was 5 years ago. We're actually, our 5-year anniversary is like next week. We've been meeting every other week for 5 years straight. We've had over probably 60 men come through the circle. But usually we have anywhere from 20 to 30 show up on every other week. We get in a circle, and we provide some educational stuff to them, like expansion. We have our standards that we go by. And then the best part of the group is what we call breakouts, where we get into small groups, and each man gets, depending on how many men are in the group, get 10 or 15 minutes to just talk about whatever you want to talk about. And it's been magical to be able to give these men a place where they can come and get whatever's in their head out of their head, whether it's job related, marriage related, kid related, whatever. It just gives them the space. We create the space and give them a microphone and let them go. And the transformation I've seen out of these men has blown my mind. And I honestly can't believe there aren't more. I mean, I know there's a lot of different types of men's groups out there, but you really got to go look for them. It's not like, they're putting up billboards. So it's been a great thing. And then, on top of that, I do my one-on-one coaching as well. And that goes without saying how powerful that can be, just depending on which road you want to go down. And excuse me. Okay. I thought I turned everything off. But yeah. Yeah.
So, Bob, walk us through how you landed in that environment and helping facilitate that environment. Like, what was it in your life that moved you towards that place of power in your center, where you're like, I'm going to work with men?
Oh, that's easy story there. It goes all the way back to my childhood. So we moved when I was fourth grade. I think we moved from one town to another. Wasn't far, but I was the new kid, and I never really shook that. I never really shook that stigma because the neighborhood we moved into, there weren't really any kids my age or in my class. My brother's best friend lived 2 doors down. They were the same age, and I hung out with the younger guys. But that kind of, it happened through me for all my life. I was always like a fifth. I call it the fifth wheel. I was always the guy on the outside. I wasn't part of the group. I wasn't part of. I can't. It's. I've had some very good friends, but I haven't had that. Still haven't had that man in my life where I know I could count on him. If I called him at midnight and said, I'm thinking about doing something really stupid here, that he would talk me out of it. I've had a lot of situations like that, especially even through my divorce, where feeling very alone, feeling very isolated, feeling very disconnected, and that is, I've part of the rest of that story about my old job. So I've known two men. I had two coworkers. One man I worked with, and one man who worked for me. Actually, for a very short period of time, but they took their own lives. And I've known a lot of men who have told me they think about it. I know I've thought about it. I thought about it a lot during my divorce, because it was an upheaval of everything I knew. And to lose my home and to lose contact with my kids for extended periods of time was devastating. And I kind of came out of all that, and through that work I did with my coach, kind of figured out that I don't want any man to be in that situation. And unfortunately, the more I talk to men, even the ones who you would look at them and say, wow, he's got a really good job, a really good career, he's got a great wife, but he's struggling every single day with his own thoughts and his own mindset. And I swore that I would never turn my back on a man who was in that place.
Yeah, that's incredible. So much of society, from boyhood to adulthood, is no longer seeing men. It's been said that most men live lives of quiet desperation.
Yeah.
And in my work with helping people identify and release trapped and repressed emotions, it's amazing how often I find in men who are fathers, head of households, the worry that they carry with them about that, the anxiety or nervousness that they carry around with that, the frustration sometimes that they carry with that. And these are very real things. And when they're swallowed down, that's no good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what happens with the sort of masculine ideal in many of our societies, is that's what people are trained to do. That's what men are trained to do. Society says, you've got to be strong. You've got to persevere. You've got to be the provider, right? Now, to be honest, I love that role, but it doesn't make it easy.
Yeah, exactly.
And so a lot of men are struggling with that, and they're doing it quietly. Yeah. Without somebody to talk to. This is, of course, where the right coach can help. People can see a therapist for that sort of thing. Certainly, a lot of men come into my therapy practice with those same concerns, and they just don't know how to express the fact that they're completely overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. Right? Maybe their wife sent them to me and said, you need to go get relationship counseling, right? And he gets in there, and this is a guy who's just totally, completely overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And so what are some of the threads that you find in the men that you work with?
Threads of that kind. A lot of disconnection from fathers. That's the big one. Whether it's, they lost their father early in life, or their father was there but not there. Those relationships, or father was demanding, highly demanding, where they felt like they could never please him or keep up with him. That's a big one. I just thought of something else and it jumped out of my mind.
These are common threads that I see in my work as well.
Yeah. A lot of it is, divorced men. We have I'd say probably about half of the men's group right now is probably divorced. Then just, men that didn't see marriage demonstrated how it should be and how it was supposed to be, and that, of course, then their marriages fail, and then they come back and they're talking about, I can't find, there's no good women out there, and all that. And it's because you got to heal. You got to heal yourself.
Amen to that.
You got to have that internal. I mean, it sounds real woo woo for a man to say, I need to build self-love and internal love, but that was one of the biggest turning points for me. Was a friend of mine recommended a book called it's called Love Yourself by Kamal Ravikant. And that book completely changed my life. It was right around that same period of time where I started working with a coach, and it still to this day, I recommend that book to anybody who is feeling like they're disconnected, or aren't able to be in touch with themselves, to feel that feeling and know that you have value and you have worth. It's just it was, again, major thing we kind of talked about in the pre-show. My story was that being born or being conceived prior to my parents being married was a big revelation for me during my process of, actually not my process of working with a coach, but my process of becoming a coach during my training, because I was being coached as I was being trained. That revelation of the birthright birthright to exist, it's called, when you have a massive trauma, or some trauma going on from the time you're prior to 6 months from you being born till the day you're born. Things can actually happen outside and around you that you absorb emotionally into your body. And that's exactly what I've realized happened to me. And then that created an identity of me, whether, and I didn't even know that it was creating an identity because I wasn't even born. And just with those things going on around me, now that I know what they are, I can look back and say, oh yeah, that because I felt this way, I felt like I, wasn't, that I didn't matter, or I wasn't welcome, or that I was, I was kind of always feeling invisible when I could be in a crowd of people, but I felt like I was invisible because nobody even saw me there. And then that translated into elementary school, into high school, into college, into my marriage, and all the way until that day when I realized, wow, that's what's causing all of this chaos in my life. And then did the work to reconcile it and come to grips with it, I am loved. I am a valuable person. I do have worth, and I have, a massive purpose and a massive mission in life. And so many of those things have changed right now, today, I made a video yesterday on my social media. You can actually, I'll plug that while I'm here. It's the relationship engineer on both TikTok and Instagram. But I learned, I was yesterday years old when I learned that the difference between happiness and joy. I never knew the difference between happiness and joy. I was kind of thought, it's just being happy, right? Well, I realized that happiness is external. It's something that you get from other people. Like if you eat a slice of pizza and it makes you feel really good, and you're happy because you ate this slice of pizza. versus internally, when you're doing things every day in alignment with your purpose, in integrity with yourself, and genuinely loving yourself, and genuinely connecting with those people around you, not only in your immediate circle, but in your extended circles, whether it's work or church or school or wherever it is, those are the things that bring you joy. And I have felt such joy for weeks on end now because of something that happened to me a few weeks ago. It blew my mind to realize that there is that differential, and that I can recall through my entire life just trying to be happy when really I wanted to find joy.
Really, you wanted to amplify your self-worth.
Yeah.
Right? And so what we do is we tend to externalize that. So we tend to look for things in our environment to validate that with us. And that's a common wound in people.
Yeah.
I find that a lot in the adults that I work with who were children who grew up under drug addicted or alcohol addicted parents. I find a lot of that, a lack of self-worth, a looking outside of oneself for that validation. And really, it's kind of going to let you down every time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really more dopamine, not serotonin. Serotonin is that long-term wellness, that long-term happiness. And when we go inside and we do the inner work, it changes everything. Because therein lies our ability to find our center place, our place of our power,
Mm-hmm.
a place of our purpose, our meaning. Sprinkle a little discipline on there, and you really got a recipe there.
Yeah.
But so many of us aren't told that.
Yeah. No.
And then on top of that, we are like I'm 50 years old, right? I'm part of an entire generation of men raised by women.
Yes.
And my mom, while she was very good at developing and taking a helpless infant to turn into a boy, beyond that, it was outside of her ability to help that boy then become a man.
Yeah.
And so what happens a lot when I meet with people in my practices is that when you're 18, 19, 20, 21, all the way really up till whenever you get that you have to find this your responsibility. If you grew up with a single mom, it's your responsibility to find mentors who are male, who can help you enter that adult phase. It doesn't happen by default.
No.
Under those circumstances. And so there's that quiet desperation again. We don't know what is this lack of worthiness that we're feeling, and why are we feeling that way? I mean, we look in the mirror and we think, it's a good looking guy, like I got a lot of things going for me. Why do I feel this way? And it's kind of part of that program. And then on top of that, we absorb a lot of the emotions that our parents, or our parent in this case, example of what we're talking about, are experiencing. I like to say in my work that energy doesn't lie. Okay, when someone's having an emotional experience and they're trying to manage their body language and their tone and their facial expression so that doesn't show somehow. Okay, energy doesn't lie. We're empathic beings. That's our gift.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I like to say to people, energy doesn't lie. People do. and unfortunately we'll lie to ourselves as well, and there's no end to that, and it's just kind of part of the human experience. But that picking up that emotion, you're talking about picking up emotions from your mom in the womb, right? That is profound paradigm shifting stuff.
Yeah.
That we're not taught.
No.
What was that realization like for you?
It was literally the little mind-blowing emoji. That's what I think of when I think of that That moment was just like, holy cow, how it really, it almost makes you angry, like you said, because nobody tells you this stuff. We're all just going through life. I mean, I would think that should be on a, they teach us about math, and they teach us about, name every president that's ever been. All these things that we learn in school that we really don't need to know. This should be one of them. It's how when if you feel like this, it's because you had a trauma when you're 0 to 5 years old. It's just it just seems backwards that they keep all those things because maybe they're going to hurt or make us worse or hurt our feelings or set us back or something. But I don't know. It just I know I still, I guess maybe you probably haven't reconciled it completely. Why that is the way it is. But yeah, it was a great revelation for me because it's allowed me to live the last 6 or 7 years of my life with that freedom of knowing that I really am okay. I really do have a purpose in life. I really do add value to people's lives. And it happens over and over again now, every single day, because I'm intentional. I'm intentional about seeking those opportunities. For example, this past weekend, my church was doing a community night event, and I had volunteered to help facilitate one of the groups, and this particular group was anxiety and depression. And we had 6 or 7, 8 people in the room, very intimate, just talking and going through some things. And I had thought about the week before we did a forgiveness meditation that I had in my book, and as the discussion started to unfold, I had taken my whole coaching binder with me with all my notes and stuff in it. And it just this one young lady, she's in her 20s, and she said something that just triggered me about, that childhood wounding kind of stuff and how she felt. And I started reading her the description of like, well, do you feel like this? And do you feel like this? And do you feel like this? And she's like, yeah, every one of them. And it ends up she doesn't really even know the details. Again, here's the energy, right? She doesn't know the real details, but her birth father left when she was about 2 years old. And her only recollection from that time period is that there was a new man with her mother in her life that became her stepfather. And she's like, I don't remember my birth father. All I remember is the stepfather came in when I was 2. And I was like, well, yeah. Traumatic experience. You're somebody that was part of taking care of you and providing for you for that first year or so of your life. Excuse me. Left your life, and there was who knows how long that gap was, but you absorbed that energetically, and that formed a meaning about you in your own head. And therefore you've developed these feelings, and this is how you felt your life. And I said, look through your entire life. Can you see where those things have come up? And she's like, yeah. And she's like, how come nobody ever told me this? I want to say she did have she'd had some kind of mental health training, like a nurse or something, something along those lines. And she was like, how come nobody ever taught me this? And it's like, yeah, I know. It's the same. I said the same thing back when I learned that it's just those small little revelations of how did I get the way I am. It helps you make complete sense out of everything that's ever happened, and it just for me it's been freeing.
And that is the feeling. It's like a liberation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The reason that I took my coaching platform and started focusing it just for therapists, right, was because I realized it was difficult for therapists to find people to really work on their stuff. That really is super important inner work. That's an ongoing process. If you're going to be a psychotherapist, you're going to need to work on your stuff. But how do therapists find that? that help, that's like that level, that's beyond where they're at, because they most therapists are really just experts in their field. And so where do we find that, right? And where do we deal with those core wounds of worthiness? Like, worthiness is literally like a core wound of humanity. And why aren't we told about this? These are legitimate questions you're asking, right? Why isn't that part of our education system? Why isn't that part of what our churches that are there to bring us to love, right? Why are they not telling us about this, right? Why are our systems that are out there encouraging us to externalize our validation and our self-worth, when in actuality that's our birthright?
Yeah.
That's part of our original blueprint, and it's a beautiful thing, just like our emotions are. Why aren't we told that, hey, emotions are just messengers? That's all they are. When it comes down to it, it's really a binary distinction. Things are they're letting us know things are as we would like them to be in our environment, or things are not like we would want them to be in our environment. And when we come to that understanding about what our emotions actually are, we become liberated and free to experience them in their fullness, in their richness. Because we know once we've got the message, we can do what emotion and energy is supposed to do, which is to move along. It moves along. If we look at the word emotion, it is energy in motion. Our emotions are so much like walking across carpet in our socks and walking up to another person. What is going to happen there, right? That energy is just going to dissipate and keep moving, right? Our emotions are exactly like that. Why aren't we being taught that, right? Why are we being taught to stuff them down? Why are we being taught to be tough? Now, it is important to be tough, and you've got to develop a skin, right? A thick skin. It's true. Okay, this world is full of things that we need to we need to make sure that we're in a good space with. Okay, as we go through them. But every single time we enter into resistance of our emotion, it amplifies the emotion, makes it last longer. I think about my brother's book. I'm going to put a plug in for this book here. If anybody hasn't read Inner Sky by Stephen Layer, right? This is the book to read. Life begins where resistance ends. I've read this book so many times, and I've recommended it to so many people, because when we are in that state of resistance to our emotions, they become worse, not better.
Yeah.
A lot of my work that I've done as a psychotherapist has been with addiction clients. And so if you look at the three aspects of a healthy relationship with emotion, right? We create the vibration of the emotion. We can inherit this vibration. We can pick it up from other people, because energy doesn't lie, people do. Okay. And then we feel the emotion. This is where our resistance starts, right? Because we're like, oh, that doesn't feel good, right? And if we're in a healthy relationship with emotion, we get to that third spot, which is we've got the message. Now we're going to let it go. We're going to release that, right? And what happens in addiction a lot is that people find something, alcohol, Oxycontin, okay? Name your drug, okay? It's usually in the opposite direction of what they're feeling. And they take that in order to keep numb enough in some way that they don't create the vibration in the first place. And they just stuff that down, which is all great until it's not. But that's the spot of addiction, right? When you get so much resistance to your emotions that you just don't even want to even take the chance of feeling that, like, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So let's shift for a moment. You had an experience, and I wonder if you would share this with your audience. You remarried after your divorce, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then your new wife was involved in an auto accident, am I
Yeah, 7 years ago.
Yeah, 7 years ago. And tell me about that experience. Tell me about your emotional experience with that. And then I'd really like you to share with people your sort of aha moment in your healing moment in that journey.
Yeah. So 7 years ago, she was in a pretty serious car accident. Actually, it's been the second car accident she's been in her life, which um, we think is what probably led to a lot of her issues that she's having cognitively. And she didn't know, no broken bones, no lacerated livers or anything like that. But her bell got rung real good, and she does have chronic pain in her neck and her shoulders and stuff. And mostly she calls it a low grade nausea 100% of the time, which I couldn't even fathom. She's my hero that she deals with that every day and just keeps on trucking, because I couldn't do it. I get a hangnail and I can't stand it. So, but she's been dealing with it now for 7 years, and we hope and pray every day that she's going to get better. And I remember thinking back when it first happened, oh, you're going to be okay, in a year you'll be fine. And here we are 7 years later. We even we had talked to a neighbor at one point. He said, oh yeah, I was in a car accident. It took me 5 years to heal. It's like, oh my God, 5 years. And again, we've blown through that. We're at 7, and she still, she struggles. So the part of that affects me the most is the anger, right? I was still, keyword, I was still angry and resentful of the man that hit her, because it was nothing. My wife had no stay. She was driving along. This man turned in front of her, says he didn't see her coming because the sun was in his eyes. And she ran right into the front corner of his car. Well, this is an evening in Michigan. She's traveling southbound. I'm sorry, she was traveling northbound. He was traveling southbound. And the setting sun in October was somewhere over that direction. So the sun being in his eyes, well, I'm sure it was the light of his cell phone was what was reflecting in his eyes. So that just that moment of his ignorance, stupidity, whatever you want to call it, upheaved our lives. There's things that we still can't do that we used to love doing, like we used to go bike riding a lot. Like I remember I told you in the pre-show, we went bike riding in Traverse City. That was before the accident. We haven't gone bike riding since that experience. There's just things we can't do. There's, she hasn't been able to go to the gym. She can't work out. She can't, she had one shoulder repaired. She hasn't had the other one done yet, but just a lot around it. So again, a lot of anger on my behalf. And every time I would think of it, or every time I see her, or every time I want to do something and I can't do something with her, brings up that anger. So I was at a men's retreat about a month ago. And during one of the periods that were, they're talking, the speaker on the stage and giving his wisdom and whatever, that kind of brought those feelings up in me. So then we had a breakout group right after that, and we're sitting in a circle bus, 7 or 8 men, and they said, okay, well, who wants to talk about something they got from this message? And I jumped right in, and that's, here's my issue, anger. I'm still resentful to this man. I'm still angry with this man. And as much work as I've done around it in this 7-year period, I can't seem to let it all go. So they instantly, there's a Christian men's retreat. So of course they prayed over me, laid hands on me, prayed over me, which was super powerful to begin with. That was amazing for them to take that and put that kind of love into me from their spirit. But then this young man that was in the group, he was about 20 years old. He was from Colombia. I don't know if I think he understood a little bit of English, but he didn't speak it very well. And he tells he tells me through our interpreter that was in the group that I want to I want to do something for Bob. I want to be a surrogate for him. And I got really confused all of a sudden. I was like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Because I want to stand here and be the man that hit your wife in the car accident. I want to tell you some things. I'm real skeptical. I'm like, okay, this is really weird. He put his hand on my shoulder. He looked me dead in the eye, and he started apologizing to me. He started, I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry for paying more attention on my cell phone than the road. I'm sorry I hurt your wife. I'm sorry I made these drastic changes in your life. I'm sorry you can't do the things that you and your wife used to be able to do and enjoy and all that. And he's saying all this, and I was flabbergasted because I've never had somebody step up like that in my life before and do something that's just that kind and empathetic and it blew my mind. And I've told this story now probably 20 or 30 times since that day. And every time I tell it, it reinforces it a little bit more that I was able to truly, and I told them during the context of the conversation, I said, I forgive you. And I said it to this surrogate man's face, but yeah, like we've been talking a lot about energy, right? So the energy went into that man, and of course it to wherever this man was, and he doesn't live far from me because it happened around our home in our town here. So that energy had a place to go, and it went, and it's now out of me and out of my system, and I don't hold that anger anymore. And it's been truly a great thing, because even since then, just the things that have come into my life because I was allowed to let that out of my life, it just keeps getting better. Every day it keeps getting better. Except obviously my throat today, and I can't talk because.
So when we hold these strong emotions inside us, they occupy space.
Mm-hmm.
Space that could be utilized to be in the present moment. Space that could be utilized to show love to our neighbor. Mm-hmm. Right? The one of the two greatest commandments. Right? They take up space inside us. And not only do they take up space, but they have all these triggers associated with them. It can literally, I tell people, like, the triggers that are associated with these emotions that we're holding, that we're burying in our subconscious because they're just too unbearable for us. And we think that they're somehow going to consume us if we interact with them. The triggers, there's every single one of those emotions that we stuff down has associated with it a certain number of unique triggers. Right? That'll take that little ball of energy we stored in our body and make it a gigantic ball of energy. And they can be to our conscious mind, the silliest things we could imagine. Right? Now, there are, of course, things like, sights, sounds, people, circumstances. Right? Those are pretty obvious. But it could be something as ridiculous as a color paint on a car. It can just be the most ridiculous things. And then what happens is these triggers of these, trapped and repressed emotional energies, these triggers are just laying out there. And they're like a gigantic minefield where all the mines are buried under this perfect grass and we cannot see them. And it's like every day when we have these trapped emotions, every day it's like we're running through that minefield, and these mines are just popping off, and we can't even see them coming because our conscious mind is not capable of understanding every single one of those triggers. One of the things that I've found with my clients who have panic attacks is universally people will say, well, I don't know why they happen. everything could be going great one day, and then all of a sudden I'm having a panic attack. They just come out of nowhere. And it's like, no, you just stepped on an emotional landmine that was just sitting there and you didn't see it coming. And, one of the examples I give of this is, because we're talking about, repressed emotional energies, absorbed and trapped, right? Absorbed from other people. It can even be inherited, right? To a more limited degree, but we absorb a lot from our environment. So it's the story of a 28-year-old guy sitting in his primary's waiting room, waiting to see the doctor. And he's sitting there, and he's doesn't have any major health concerns or anything. So it's just an annual checkup, and he's looking around, and like me, this doctor happens to have like a million plants everywhere in the lobby, and so he's looking around at the plants, and he's like, oh. He starts feeling really anxious. The next thing you know, he's like in a full-blown panic attack. He's like, what the heck is going on? So the nurse comes out and grabs him. The panic attack's over. He goes in. He says, wow, doc, I just had a massive panic attack in your lobby. And the doctor's like, oh, well, let's see here. Asks 5 questions, right? And then says, oh, well, you have panic attack disorder. Okay, genius diagnostic, right? And so prescribes him some Xanax, as needed, and goes on with the thing, right? And that's kind of how doctors do it. So turns out that same guy, 20 years before, when he was 8 years old, had gone on this amazing experience of a lifetime, 2-week trip with his mom, and they just had a fantastic time. When they came home, right? Of course, the mother they were gone for 2 weeks. So the mother also loved plants and had all kinds of plants around the house. And so, of course, the mom had to get, a friend or a neighbor or someone to come over and take care of her plants while she was gone. Well, they get back from this time of their life vacation, and they walk in the house, and half of the plants are dead. And the other half, it's debatable whether they're going to survive, right? So, and then this child's mom just starts freaking out and panicking, right? And she's pouring water into all these plants, and she's running around with all this panic, right? And this little 8-year-old kid, he doesn't know what to do with that. I mean, there is a serious vibe in the room, in creating that vibration in him, and how feeling the emotion. He doesn't know what to do with it. So he just does what he can, and he just kind of swallows it down, and that's it. Where it sits until he's sitting in a lobby 20 years later with a bunch of plants, having a panic attack out of nowhere. Right?
Mind is an incredible thing, isn't it?
It truly is. And it can be our best friend and our worst enemy.
Yes, it can.
So when you talk about absorbed, trapped emotions, right? As I said before, energy doesn't lie. It's there, it's present. Whether we're in the womb, right? And think about all the emotions that are in that area of the body, right? Nervousness, anxiety, worry, dread, despair, fear, right? All these things that are like right there emotionally, physically in the body. And then there we are being carried right inside that, all that bundle of emotions. What's going to happen? Well, it's a possibility that we absorb that until we go deep into the subconscious and dig that stuff out, let it go. There's a myriad of different processes that people use to do that very thing. It's just going to sit there and it's going to cause mischief because its natural energy is to move. It's natural movement, right? Energy moves. It's emotions, energy and motion, right? But no, it's stuck there.
Yeah. It's got to be the word I learned the other day was disruption. We need to disrupt that and get it to start moving again. Because if we just let it sit there, it's never going to go anywhere.
It isn't. And it's just going to cause mischief in our lives and in our relationships, in our careers, right? In my work with other therapists, The reason is I want them to amplify this. I want them to do that work themselves, take it to their practices, and amplify the healing effect with their clients that may be inspired to then go and learn the same technique and amplify that in their life. There's a lot of call for that type of healing in our world.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Bob, we're coming to near the end of the podcast here, but what is if there were a message or two that you really wanted to get across to people, what would that be? And please share that with our audience.
First is get connected. Get connected with other people. We are not made to do life alone. We are not made to do life alone. And so many people, and men especially, think we can, quote unquote, survive this life by doing everything on their own. And the more I see it, the more I experience people getting together and connecting, it just the changes it can break, and the power. You mentioned power earlier. Just giving us our power back to find that joy. Like I said earlier, joy, finding that joy and living in joy every single day. Probably the second thing. The second thing for me is my relationship with God and Jesus. It's another one of the paths that I've been on for the last 5 years or so. My wife and I, one of the things we did coming out of the accident, we're trying to heal and get through the things that we were going through with her physically and all that, mentally, was we started going back to church again. And I'd never been a churchgoer. I sporadically on and off all my life, but I was really never, it just never made sense to me. And getting back and being in a church where they teach, the great commandment, love God and love thy neighbor. Just
right.
It's made a huge difference in my life, because I was so disconnected for the majority of my life. Again, feeling alone in a room full of people. I don't feel that way anymore. I go to church and I feel like I'm in a room with a bunch of my brothers and sisters, and people that I love and people that I care about, people that I want to serve. We serve almost every Sunday. We do something to help move that, kind of like coming back to all the things you said, move that energy, right? We can't. My wife actually came up with a couple years ago. She does her word of the year, right? So amazing my wife is. She came up with the word river, and you can't be a lake, because if a lake, you're holding everything, right? You're just living amongst yourself. But if you're a river, you're flowing. Things are coming in, things are going out. And that I always remember, always comes into my mind, like in conversations like this, about letting that energy flow through you, letting the love flow through you from Him, because it's all coming from Him. Everything that it has to do with love is God. It comes through me, comes through you, comes to you, every one of the people that's listening to this podcast right now, or listen to it later on. The reason we are doing what we do and doing what we do with our lives is because we want to share His love with other people and have them wake up to that experience of that. Whether you had a traumatic issue when you were in your mother's womb and don't feel loved, you are loved. You are always loved, and you will always be loved. It's just it's one of the things I wish I had learned earlier in life. You said earlier you're 50. I'm a couple of years ahead of you, but I didn't find it till late in life. I didn't find this all this healing from all of these, this trauma of my youth. But, I mean, I had bullying and everything happen to me when I was younger. So lots of wounds. I call it death by 1,000 cuts. And getting to know him and living and abiding in him every single day is what brings me that joy that I mentioned earlier. Because he's given me all the things. He's like, okay, you've got that. Now I want you to do this. You've done this. Now I want you to talk to this person. I want you to love on this person and be there for this person. And it's so, feels so good. It's so, I used the word freedom earlier. It's freeing. It's amazing. There's no other way to describe it.
Greatest love we show is to be in service to others.
Yes.
Absolutely amazing. I want to thank you so much for your sharing with us today, Bob. And I think what I'm probably going to follow up with you later and have you back on here.
Yeah, I think we could probably put it on another hour and not even skip a beat, but
we could. That's for sure. So I'd like to thank all our audience, of course, for listening to our show today. You can learn more about our guests today by, of course, following the links in the description. And as always, I want to remind you to search your heart, do the important inner work, and give yourself permission to find your purpose and live your life's work. Thank you again for listening today. And thank you, Bob.
You're welcome. Thank you.